On the training ground, young soldiers threw an old military uniform into the fire, their laughter echoing loudly. "You're just a joke, not worthy of wearing this." The small woman stood silently, her eyes red with emotion, but she didn't say a single word. They thought that by burning that uniform, they had destroyed her dreams completely and forever. But months later, when the door burst open, she walked in wearing an official SEAL uniform. The entire room fell dead silent. Her name was Sofia Delgado, 27 years old with long brown hair that she kept pulled back in a regulation ponytail, a slender frame that seemed almost fragile compared to the larger recruits around her, and a gentle face that held eyes filled with quiet determination. Most personnel in the mixed training program noticed her size first, the way she had to adjust equipment designed for larger bodies, the way she seemed to struggle with physical tasks that came easily to others, the way she often finished exercises just within the required time limits rather than exceeding them by comfortable margins. What they missed was the steel that lived beneath that deceptively gentle exterior. Sofia was a recruit in the integrated military training program, a position that placed her among soldiers who had come from various backgrounds and specialties, but were united in their belief that military service required a certain type of physical and mental toughness that they weren't sure she possessed. "She belongs in the kitchen, not on the battlefield," Private Johnson would say when he thought she couldn't hear, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who had never questioned his own assumptions about capability and gender. Sergeant Martinez was more direct in his assessment during equipment inspection. "Why don't you just quit now and save everyone the trouble? We don't need people who can't handle real military training dragging down the rest of the unit." But Sofia never defended herself against their criticism or tried to prove her worth through boastful claims about hidden capabilities. She simply continued doing what she did best, enduring whatever challenges were placed in front of her, while quietly helping others whenever possible. When a fellow recruit twisted his ankle during a long march, Sofia helped support his weight and guided him back to the medical tent, despite her own exhaustion. When food supplies ran short during field exercises, she shared her rations with soldiers who had eaten theirs too quickly earlier in the day. When younger recruits felt overwhelmed by the intensity of training, she offered quiet encouragement that helped them persevere through difficult moments. These weren't dramatic gestures that impressed drill instructors or earned special recognition. No one awarded points for helping injured teammates or sharing food during supply shortages. But every person she helped noticed something about her, a steadiness under pressure, a refusal to give up regardless of circumstances, a way of putting others' needs ahead of her own comfort that distinguished her from recruits who were focused primarily on their own advancement. In her personal footlocker, carefully hidden beneath regulation clothing and standard military gear, was an old photograph that looked worn from years of handling. The image showed several people in specialized military equipment, and at the bottom, written in faded ink, were the words, "Kraken never dies." During a particularly difficult week when several recruits had been dismissed from the program for various failures, Sofia found herself paired with a soldier named Tommy, who had been struggling with the physical demands of training. As they worked together during a survival exercise, he confided his fears about not measuring up to military standards. "You know what keeps me going?" Sofia said quietly as they shared a meager meal around a small fire. "You told me once that someday I'll wear that uniform again, and no one will be able to stop me. You thought it was just a dream, didn't you?" Tommy looked at her more carefully, noticing for the first time something in her eyes that suggested experiences beyond what her current situation indicated. There was a confidence beneath her humility, a knowledge that seemed to exceed what someone her age should possess based on standard military progression. Tommy would later tell anyone who'd listen. She said that someday she'd wear that uniform again, and no one could stop her. "I thought it was just a dream." The incident that changed everything occurred during what should have been a routine training exercise. A combination of equipment failure, miscommunication, And bad luck resulted in Sofia being blamed for a safety violation that could have endangered other recruits. The investigation was swift, the conclusions were predetermined, and the consequences were severe. "Recruit Delgado," announced Captain Williams during the formal disciplinary hearing, "you are hereby removed from the advanced training program and reassigned to logistics support duties, effective immediately." The room was filled with other recruits who had been called to witness what the command staff clearly intended as an object lesson about the consequences of failure. Some looked relieved that they weren't the ones facing dismissal. Others seemed uncomfortable with the public nature of the humiliation, but none spoke in her defense. "You will never be a SEAL," Captain Williams continued, his voice carrying the finality of someone delivering an unchangeable verdict. "Accept this reality and focus on finding ways to serve that match your actual capabilities." As Sofia gathered her personal belongings and prepared to move to quarters designated for support personnel, she found that her former training partners began avoiding her completely. Being associated with someone who had failed so publicly was seen as a potential risk to their own advancement, and the social isolation was perhaps more painful than the official punishment. But what happened next would haunt Sofia for months and fuel a determination that none of her tormentors could have anticipated. A group of recruits, emboldened by the official dismissal and eager to demonstrate their own superiority, decided that symbolic humiliation would be more effective than mere avoidance. They gathered Sofia's training uniform, the one she had worn during months of grueling preparation, and built a fire in the training area where everyone could see. "This is what happens to people who don't belong here," announced Private Rodriguez, as he held up the uniform for everyone to see. "Some people need to learn their place the hard way." The flames consumed the fabric quickly, and the gathered recruits cheered as if they were witnessing some kind of victory rather than the destruction of someone's dreams. Sofia stood at a distance, watching silently as months of effort and aspiration turned to ash and smoke. "You're just a joke," another recruit called out, his voice carrying across the training ground. "You were never worthy of wearing that uniform anyway." But instead of leaving the base in defeat as everyone expected, Sofia did something that surprised even her critics. She remained at the installation, accepting the logistics assignment while beginning a training regimen that exceeded anything required by her new position. Every night, after completing her assigned duties, she ran 20 kilometers through terrain that challenged even experienced soldiers. She practiced underwater swimming in freezing conditions that would have discouraged recreational athletes. She lifted improvised weights made from sand-filled containers, following exercise routines that seemed designed for someone preparing for much more demanding physical challenges than logistics work required. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a veteran instructor who had been observing military training for over 2 decades, began noticing Sofia's unofficial preparation routine during his late-night security rounds. What he saw troubled and impressed him in equal measure. "That's not normal military fitness training," he confided to a colleague after watching Sofia complete a series of exercises that seemed to follow specialized protocols. "That's the kind of discipline and technique that comes from Kraken unit preparation." He'd heard stories about Kraken unit, whispered legends about special operations personnel who underwent training so demanding that most people couldn't even comprehend what was required. But those were classified programs that supposedly recruited only from the most elite military backgrounds, not from personnel who had been dismissed from standard training programs. As weeks turned into months, word spread throughout the base about the woman who had been publicly humiliated but refused to quit. Some soldiers admired her persistence, others considered it stubborn denial of reality, but everyone noticed that she was preparing for something far beyond her current assignment. "She's delusional," some recruits would say when they saw her training. "She still thinks she can become something she's not." But Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who had seen many different types of military personnel during his long career, recognized something in Sofia's preparation that reminded him of the most elite soldiers he had ever encountered. "I've seen someone like this before," he told his wife during a quiet conversation at home. That person became a legendary SEAL. Sofia has the same fire burning inside her. The truth was more complex than anyone on the base realized, but it would soon become impossible to ignore. Master Sergeant Rodriguez would later tell the story this way. I'd seen someone like that before. That person became a legendary SEAL. Sofia had that same fire. The emergency call came at 03:47 hours on a Tuesday morning when most of the base was asleep. Intelligence reports indicated that a reconnaissance unit had been compromised during what should have been a routine information gathering mission. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and facing imminent capture or elimination unless immediate assistance could be provided. "We need all available SEAL personnel for immediate deployment," announced Colonel Harrison over the base-wide communication system. "This is not a drill. Report to Briefing Room Alpha immediately." But as the available personnel assembled, it became clear that recent deployments and medical leave had left the base short of the specialized capabilities required for the rescue mission. The mathematics were simple and unforgiving. They had more mission requirements than qualified personnel to fulfill them. "Sir," reported the operations officer after completing his personnel assessment, "we're 3 operators short of minimum requirements for this type of extraction." That's when someone mentioned Sofia's name. "What about Delgado?" asked Lieutenant Morrison, a junior officer who had been following the situation with growing concern. "I know she was reassigned to logistics, but she's been training like she's preparing for special operations. Maybe she could fill a support role." The suggestion was met with skeptical silence from senior personnel, who remembered her public dismissal from the training program. Using someone who had officially failed advanced training for an actual special operations mission seemed like compounding one mistake with another. "She's not qualified," Captain Williams stated flatly. "She couldn't handle basic training requirements. There's no way she can perform under real operational stress." But Colonel Harrison, faced with an impossible choice between launching an undermanned mission or allowing friendly forces to be captured, made a decision that would change everything. "Bring her in," he ordered. "We'll use her in a limited support capacity. At minimum, she can handle equipment and communications while the qualified personnel focus on tactical operations." When Sofia received the call to report for emergency briefing, she moved with the kind of calm efficiency that suggested someone who had been preparing for exactly this moment. Her response time, her equipment preparation, her overall readiness demonstrated a level of capability that surprised everyone who had written her off as unsuitable for military service. "Here's the situation," Colonel Harrison explained as the hastily assembled team gathered around tactical maps and intelligence photos. "We have friendly forces surrounded and facing imminent capture. The extraction point is heavily defended. The approach requires underwater infiltration, and the timeline is extremely tight. What happened next would be analyzed in special operations training programs for years to come." Sofia studied the mission parameters with eyes that moved in patterns the other team members recognized from their own advanced training. She was reading the tactical situation in the systematic way that special operations personnel learn to assess multiple critical factors simultaneously, not like someone who was seeing this type of planning for the first time. "The underwater approach is 3 kilometers through hostile territory," she said quietly, her voice carrying a tone of professional assessment rather than civilian curiosity. "Current conditions, water temperature, and enemy patrol patterns suggest a narrow window for undetected movement." The team leader stared at her in amazement. Every detail she had mentioned was accurate, and her analysis demonstrated knowledge that shouldn't exist in someone whose military experience was limited to failed basic training and logistics support. "How do you know that?" demanded Captain Williams, his voice carrying disbelief and growing suspicion. Instead of answering directly, Sofia began moving with the practiced efficiency of someone preparing for a mission she had undertaken many times before. Her equipment selection was perfect, her preparation routine was flawless, and her overall bearing suggested someone whose capabilities far exceeded anything her official record indicated. The mission itself became a masterclass in special operations that none of the qualified personnel had expected from their supposedly unqualified support member. Sofia completed the underwater infiltration without detection, established the communications link that enabled the rescue, and provided the kind of precise tactical support that distinguished elite operators from conventional forces. "Where the hell did she learn to do that?" whispered one of the SEAL team members as he watched Sofia navigate hostile territory with the kind of skill that comes only from extensive combat experience. The truth, when it finally emerged through encrypted communication channels and classified personnel records, hit the special operations community like an earthquake. Sofia Delgado wasn't a failed recruit who had been reassigned to logistics. She was a decorated SEAL who had been operating under deep cover assignment that required her to maintain a false identity while gathering intelligence on training program security and personnel reliability. Her failure had been orchestrated, her dismissal had been theater, and her months of enduring humiliation had been part of an operation designed to test the integrity and character of both instructors and trainees in the advanced training program. "Sofia Delgado, SEAL Team 6, Colonel Harrison announced to the stunned briefing room as he read from classified personnel files that had just been declassified. Current assignment, counterintelligence evaluation of training program security protocols. The revelation that they had been humiliating a decorated special operations veteran rather than a failed recruit created a moment of silence so profound that the only sound was the quiet hum of electronic equipment. The recruits who had burned her uniform, who had mocked her capabilities, who had treated her dismissal as entertainment, now understood that they had been judging someone whose qualifications exceeded their own by margins they couldn't even comprehend. "Ma'am," stammered Private Rodriguez, the same soldier who had led the uniform burning ceremony, We didn't know. We're sorry." Sofia looked at him with the same calm expression she had worn while enduring months of abuse, but now everyone could see the strength that had always been there beneath the surface. "You weren't supposed to know," she said quietly. "That was the point of the exercise." As she walked toward the equipment room to prepare for the next phase of her real mission, the soldiers who had dismissed her as unworthy now stood in respectful silence, understanding that they had just learned something important about assumptions, judgment, and the difference between appearance and reality. If you believe that justice can arrive late but arrive completely, that resilience can transform humiliation into strength, type, "I owe a debt" in the comments below. In the days following the revelation of Sofia's true identity, the atmosphere on the base underwent a transformation that affected everyone from senior officers to the newest recruits. The story of the woman who had endured months of humiliation while maintaining perfect operational security became a teaching moment that spread far beyond the confines of one military installation. Sofia returned to her normal duties without fanfare or celebration, declining offers of public recognition for her successful completion of what had been an extraordinarily demanding undercover assignment. She continued her training routine, helped with logistics operations, and interacted with personnel exactly as she had before, with one crucial difference. Now, everyone understood who they were really dealing with. "I can't believe we burned the uniform of an actual SEAL," Private Johnson confided to his friends, his voice carrying shame and disbelief. "We thought we were teaching her a lesson about failure, but she was already everything we were trying to become." The sign that appeared outside the barracks said simply, "They mocked her by burning her uniform. She returned as a SEAL." It wasn't official military communication, just the community's way of processing what they had learned about judgment, perseverance, and the danger of underestimating people based on incomplete information. The transformation in how the younger recruits approached their training was immediate and profound. Knowing that they might be evaluated not just by instructors, but by people whose capabilities they couldn't recognize, created a new level of respect for the process and for each other. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been one of the few people to recognize Sofia's extraordinary preparation routine, was asked to explain how he had known she was more than she appeared to be. "Experience teaches you to look beyond the obvious," he told the assembled training staff. "Real warriors don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they're the quiet ones who just keep working when everyone else gives up." But perhaps the most significant change was in Sofia herself. The months of maintaining perfect operational discipline while enduring treatment that would have broken most people had tested her capabilities in ways that conventional training never could. She had proven to herself and to her superiors that she could maintain cover and complete mission objectives regardless of personal cost. Late one evening, when the base had settled into its normal rhythm of security rotations and equipment maintenance, Sofia sat alone in her quarters. She carefully removed the old photograph from her personal belongings, the image of her SEAL team that she had kept hidden throughout her undercover assignment. She thought about Miguel, her team leader, who had been killed during the operation that had led to her current assignment, about Carmen, her teammate, who had been wounded during the same mission and was still recovering in a military hospital, about David, the youngest member of their unit, who had volunteered for the dangerous assignment that Sofia had ultimately undertaken. "Miguel," she whispered to their memory, her voice barely audible above the distant sounds of the secure base. "I kept my word. No one broke me. The fire didn't destroy anything. It just revealed what was already there." For 6 months, she had endured treatment that was designed to break weaker people, to expose those who weren't truly committed to military service regardless of personal cost. The uniform burning had been the lowest point, but it had also been the moment when she understood that external symbols mattered far less than internal strength. The recruits who had mocked her were good soldiers who had learned an important lesson about assumptions and respect. The instructors who had dismissed her had gained valuable insight into their own evaluation methods. And Sofia had completed one of the most psychologically demanding assignments in modern military service. Type: "I will serve quietly if you believe that willpower can transform humiliation into strength." This isn't just a story about a SEAL who endured humiliation during an undercover assignment. This is a story about the danger of judging people based on incomplete information, about the choice between breaking under pressure and growing stronger because of it, about the way that real strength often operates in silence until circumstances require it to reveal itself. In a world that often judges people by their apparent failures, current struggles, or moments of vulnerability, Sofia Delgado reminds us that what we see on the surface rarely represents the complete picture. The people we dismiss as weak, unsuitable, or unqualified might be carrying capabilities, experiences, or inner strength that exceed our own understanding of what's possible. The real lesson here extends far beyond military service or undercover operations. It's about the times in your own life when you might be tempted to judge others based on limited information, or when you might face treatment that seems designed to make you give up on goals that matter to you. We live in a society that often mistakes visible success for total capability, current circumstances for permanent reality, and external validation for inner worth. But true strength frequently operates without recognition, and the most valuable qualities are often possessed by people who choose perseverance over popularity. Sofia's story teaches us to be careful about writing people off based on what appears to be failure or inadequacy, to understand that someone's current situation might not reflect their full potential or hidden capabilities, to recognize that the people who endure mistreatment without breaking might be the strongest individuals in any group. But perhaps most importantly, her story is about the choice between allowing humiliation to define us and using it as fuel for growth. For 6 months, Sofia faced treatment that was designed to break people who weren't truly committed to their goals. Instead of breaking, she used each challenge as an opportunity to prove to herself that external circumstances couldn't determine her inner reality. Think about the people in your own life who face criticism, dismissal, or outright hostility while continuing to work toward goals that others consider unrealistic. The students who persist despite being told they're not smart enough. The employees who continue striving despite being overlooked for advancement. The individuals who keep training despite being told they're not physically capable. Many of them might be carrying strength that isn't visible to people who judge based on appearance rather than character. Some of them might be preparing for opportunities that others can't even imagine. Tomorrow, you might encounter someone who appears to be struggling, failing, or giving up on dreams that seem impossible to achieve. Don't underestimate them, because they might be the person who returns wearing the uniform that everyone said they'd never earn, standing with the strength that fire couldn't destroy. If you believe in stories that touch the heart like this one, leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to NL Touching Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten. Real people are creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI.